Here is a short history of my involvement with digital publishing. June 14th, 2019. Back in 1981, I used this graphic created by Scott Kim for the cover of the tabloid I was producing for the San Francisco Center for Design entitled Centerline. At that time, the only way to do anything like this would have been in pen and ink. Scott is into inversions, words you can read both right side up and upside down. At the time, Scott was working at Xerox in Palo Alto with John Warnock and Chuck Geschke. John and Chuck had developed a language that they named Jam, and took Scott's inversion of the word infinity and wrote a routine to make it spiral to infinity. Xerox was not interested in this language, so John and Chuck started a company named Adobe. In 1982, when I heard that they had opened an office, I visited John Warnock at their new office. When I entered the office, John was the receptionist. Adobe changed the name of the language to PostScript, which first became accessible to the market with the introduction of the Apple LaserWriter. Sumner Stone, the master font designer, had been hired by Adobe to convert fonts into the new vector-based, device-independent page description language, PostScript. In March of 1985, I interviewed Sumner to give the readers of ShowPage, the magazine I produced for the San Francisco Macintosh Users Group, some perspective about what the technology was now offering. By the way, ShowPage was the first Macintosh Users Group. Instantly, companies started to develop programs to harness the power of this page description language for the creation of graphic documents. One of the first programs for page layout was PageMaker that was being developed by a company named Aldus. Paul Brainerd, the president of Aldus, named this new technology desktop publishing. In early 1985, I called Paul and told him about my interest in his new program, my skills with the current computer typesetting systems, my employment at Via Video, which had developed the first computer painting system, and anything else I deemed relevant. He asked me if I wanted to be a beta site for PageMaker. Needless to say, I accepted. After signing the non-disclosure documents, I started using the very unstable PageMaker version 0.84. July 5th of 1985, I interviewed Paul at Aldus's first office in Pioneer Square in Seattle for another article for ShowPage. My involvement in this technology was getting around, and John Markoff interviewed me for the October 14th, 1985 issue of the San Francisco Examiner. My inspired quote was, "The sky is the limit." Regardless, this provided some name recognition to help in my plan. I knew time was of the essence and decided to host a conference about this exciting new technology. I entitled the conference The Necessary Edge Desktop Publishing. This turned out to be the very first conference about desktop publishing. I hired my friend Larry Goldman, who is an amazing programmer, who had written several programs for me to assist in technical details. Then I hired Sanborn Hodgkins to promote, coordinate, write, edit, sell ad space, and whatever. I hadn't put on a conference before, and it turns out to be a lot of work. My not-yet wife, Sherry, was recruited to edit, coordinate, and be the all-around tie-up-all-the-loose-ends person. Sherry's brother, Darren Thomas, was hired as the audio-visual technician. I reserved Building A at Fort Mason in San Francisco, which has a big hall for lectures and an adjacent room, which we set up as a demonstration room. I invited just about everybody I could think of to be presenters at this event. Obviously, Paul Brainerd had to be included, and he readily agreed. Paul's company, Aldus, grew exponentially. It was eventually purchased by Adobe for $446 million. Paul went on to found the Brainerd Foundation to organize and fund a number of groups with environmental focus, including global warming. Liz Bond was Adobe's first marketing director and outlined where this technology and Adobe were headed. At the time, Adobe's only product was the PostScript language. If you haven't noticed, they've grown quite a bit. I had Tony Beauvais be the keynote speaker. He was the editor of Desktop Publishing magazine and knew all the key players. Sumner Stone was the first font designer hired by Adobe to convert fonts into the PostScript language. Charles Bigelow and Kris Holmes are amazing font designers. Charles gave a historical overview of vector-based fonts in his light-hearted, entertaining fashion. Jim Von Eyre created a font creation program named Fontographer. Jim's company, Aldus, went on to develop Freehand, a competitor to Adobe's Illustrator. His company was subsequently bought by Macromind, Then Aldus bought Macromind, and finally Adobe bought Aldus. Jim went on to found Zyvex, the world's first molecular nanotechnology company. Michael Chong, at the time, was a salesman for Manhattan Graphics, whose product Ready Set Go was a competitor to PageMaker. Michael went on to start MacWeek magazine. Another obvious invitee was Scott Kim. He had introduced me to PostScript and its incredible power. Scott is a mathematician, puzzle maker, calligrapher, musician, you name it. Ian Zarafa of FTL Systems demonstrated their product Tech on the Mac. Tech is a typesetting language developed by Donald Knuth at Stanford in 1978. It enables the creation of complex mathematical equations. Okay, I'm halfway through the lineup, but I think you get the idea. We had a lot of people for this 12-hour conference. It was essential that the attendees be able to try out this new technology, and there was a large room adjacent to the conference hall. I got a hold of Carter Coleman at Apple's San Francisco office, and he agreed to lend me 18 Macintoshes and 2 LaserWriters. I just had to rent a truck to pick them up the day before and return them the day after the conference. We also produced a 52-page journal reviewing the technology. This was created in a very unstable PageMaker. The day started with 7 individual presentations, which included representatives from Imagen, Apple, and Linotype. This was followed by 3 panels, one for page composition software developers, by a panel discussing how these fonts were created in 2 versions, one for the computer screen and one for the printer, and a panel of the owners of service bureaus who provided an overview on how to get your documents properly output. We had La Mediterranean cater lunch and dinner with their great Mediterranean food. With 280 attendees at $150 each, and income from selling advertising in our 52-page conference journal, subtracting expenses, we made a little bit of money.